Greetings and welcome back to our study on Mark's Gospel. We are in chapter 11, and I've decided to do chapter 11 in three different parts because chapter 11 breaks up over the course of 3 days, and so it'll be easier to stay consistent on theme if I just talk about it as Monday, Tuesday, or Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of Jesus's last week. So on this video, we are talking about the Sunday of Jesus's last week, and it starts with him coming to the area around Jerusalem and staying in Bethany and Bethpage. Now we know from Luke's gospel that Mary's family uh, lived somewhere in the vicinity of Jerusalem because her relative Zechariah, who she stays with, is a priest in the temple. We know from John's gospel that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived in Bethany. And we know from Christian tradition, although not the gospel, that John Mark's family, John Mark, who traveled with Peter and Barnabas in Acts, his family lived in this area, and it is his family who Jesus eats the Last Supper with. So we don't know where in this area Jesus is staying or who he is staying with, but we do know that he knew a number of people in the Jerusalem area. Some of them may have been wealthy, like Joseph of Arimathea, and who probably lived in this region, although maybe not. The point is that Jesus had a number of friends and family in this area who he could have stayed with. It's also important to note for the fact that he commandeers a donkey. He is not asking his disciples to steal a donkey. It is very likely that he prearranged with the owner of the animal to have his disciples pick it up, and that when the disciples come to this house and they are questioned, they give kind of a passcode that the servants have been told to look for. The servants of the household would have known that Jesus was going to ask for it. The disciples come, give him, say Jesus needs this, and they say, "Oh, great, take it. It's ready for him." So the idea that Jesus is just having his disciples take a random donkey is probably wrong. It is most likely that Jesus is prearranged with somebody to take this donkey so that he can perform this sign act in Jerusalem. Now, we know that the Pharisees particularly have been paying attention to Jesus because they have been sending out scribes and other individuals to question Jesus, to confront Jesus in Galilee. So we know that he's on their radar and that they are watching for him. Jesus's actions here are about creating a confrontation, about creating this moment where people are going to see the difference between himself and the people who are in control in Jerusalem, and how he is different from them and offers something different from what is going on in Jerusalem at that time. So to do that, he enacts this sign, which is from Zechariah chapter 8, where the prophet says, "Behold, your king is coming riding on a donkey." Jesus is going to take upon himself this mantle of the anointed king talked about in Zechariah and ride into the city. Now, Mark does not note the connection to Zechariah directly. Matthew does. It is implicit, though, in Mark, and he's obviously trying to highlight this particular verse. It is also highlighting the verse in Isaiah that Mark uses to lead off his gospel, where he's talking about John coming to prepare the way of the Lord. He talks about making straight the paths of the Lord, and that entire section in the book is about preparing a roadway, taking out all of the hills and bumps and valleys and making a smooth, flat road for the king to ride into Jerusalem. We see that in the disciples symbolically laying down their garments and laying down palm branches. That is symbolic of trying to create a smooth, plush path for the king, similar to how in more modern cultures, or at least closer to modern cultures, we roll out the red carpet, which is supposed to be a plush carpet that is soft so that the king does not have any bumps in a cobblestone roadway, or spreading out rose petals or something of that kin. The idea of making it as smooth and soft as possible for the king so that his journey is as pleasant as possible. All of this is enacting the prophets, saying that the day has come when God's messenger will ride into Jerusalem, God's anointed will ride into Jerusalem and bring with him the coming day of the Lord. This idea that the prophets talked about, where Israel would finally be sorted and they would be shown to be either righteous or unrighteous, and would be divided accordingly, and God's reign and rule would take over the world. That is what Jesus is symbolically acting out. It is also kind of important to notice that Jesus was followed by maybe 100 people at this time, so he might have 100 disciples cheering him on, and then probably people got sucked into the crowd and the hype that would have been surrounding Jesus. They're riding into Jerusalem singing Psalm 118, which is the great pilgrim song that is meant to be sung when people come into Jerusalem for great festivals. And it's a high point, and I'm sure that there would have been hundreds, maybe thousands of people who were drawn into this demonstration, who really didn't know much about what was going on, but they're just kind of on the fringe. But we should not think of this as an overwhelming majority of the crowds in Jerusalem. If we're talking even a couple thousand people that are kind of sucked into this demonstration who really don't know what's going on, that pales in comparison to the number of people that would have been in and around Jerusalem that day. Estimates are maybe 500,000, maybe 1 million people coming on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So you're talking a few thousand at best, and that is just, it's a crowd. It is a large crowd by any standard, but it pales in comparison to the number of people who would have been present in Jerusalem to witness the Passover. So when we talk about this crowd, yeah, it's a large number of people who are following Jesus, but it's not something where everybody in Jerusalem would have been buzzing about it. This could have easily gone unnoticed by the average person in Jerusalem, but it would not have gone unnoticed by the hierarchy within Jerusalem. The Pharisees already had sent people to kind of feel out who Jesus was. They would have noticed. Guaranteed the Sadducees and the other temple officials and the Sanhedrin would have noticed this display. Jesus was on their radar, so they would have known what was going on, and they would have had people who would have reported to them. Would Pilate and the Roman officials cared? Probably not. This probably would not have gotten onto their radar. It just would not have made that much of a scene. But certainly the people who knew Jesus and were looking to discredit him, they would have noticed this. Jesus then proceeds into Jerusalem at the head of this throng, chanting from Psalm 118. He sees Jerusalem, he kind of takes note of it, and then leaves without incident and gets ready for Monday's adventures in Jerusalem. So we'll pick it up there with our next video. And until that time, God bless. As always, if you have questions or comments or things you want to discuss, please drop them in the comments, and I'd love to discuss them with you. Until we meet again, God bless.